Hello, my name is Sydnee Smith, and today I'll be presenting my research on the efficiency of combining green and cool roof material. So my research was inspired by the concept of permaculture. So what is permaculture? An expert in the field, Toby Hemingway, defines permaculture as a design approach based on finding and applying to our own creations some of the guiding axioms at work in natural ecosystems. So basically, permaculture looks at the systems in nature and tries to mirror that in engineering and architecture. Some common permaculture techniques include using unconventional materials and shapes to build things. So a pretty famous example is solar panels, which harness the light of the sun and turn it into electrical energy. Green and cool roofs are two other methods of permaculture that are growing in popularity around the world, so that's why I chose to focus on them for my research. So what are the benefits of green roofs? First of all, green roofs absorb rainwater. So when it rains on a building, that water has to be sent somewhere or it'll cause leaks in the roof. So a lot of buildings will pay a fee to send that water to the sewage system. With a green roof in place, the water will be absorbed into the soil and the plants, and the building owners won't have to pay that fee anymore. Another advantage is that green roofs can insulate a building from heat and from noise, which is helpful in an office building where a quieter environment is helpful to the workers. Another advantage is that green roofs can be used for gardening and recreational purposes, so overall they tend to add value to whatever building they're placed on. There are a few disadvantages, the most important one being that green roofs are a lot heavier than a normal roof. So there are two types of green roofs, intensive and extensive. Intensive roofs have deeper soil, 2 feet or more of soil, and taller, heavier plants, so that'll be the heavier type of green roof. And extensive roofs have a few inches of soil and smaller, low-lying plants like what you see here. So that'll be the lighter type of roof. Here you can see the basic anatomy of a green roof. There are lots of different factors that can influence how effective a green roof is at insulation. So first of all, like I said before, the soil depth. A deeper soil could absorb more rainwater, more noise, and more heat. The plant type can also influence it. And the inclination of the roof, or the angle that the roof is at, can influence how a roof stays in place, because if it's too steep, the soil and plants will fall off. In the past, a substantial body of research has been dedicated to the different characteristics of green roofs, trying to find which ones work the best at insulation. For example, one such study from the Journal of Environmental Management found that substrates or soil depths of 16 centimeters or more were the most effective at absorbing water, while the most effective vegetation cover was origanum, which is a genus of herbaceous perennials and subshrubs. Another study done in 2011 by Nardini, Andri, and Crasso looked at different plant and soil types and their effect on water absorption and temperature of the roof. So they found that modules covered with plants from Amaranthus retroflexus L and Chenopodium album L insulated the air below the roof and kept it 20 to 15 degrees cooler than the outside in the hottest days of summer. As for the inclination of a roof, a study done by the Bulletin of Engineering Journal found that 0.5 to 5% inclination is the most effective for green roofs. Here you can see the installation of a cool roof. Cool roofs are white paint made to reflect heat, specifically by reflecting UV light radiation more than a normal roof would. And this can actually help the building over time because the UV radiation can cause the material to warp. So with a cool roof in place, it can increase the longevity of the building. There are pros and cons to both types of roofs, but they have the same basic purpose, which is insulating a building from heat. So despite the many investigations into green roof characteristics, there's a gap in the research and where green roofs and cool roofs can be combined and used on the same roof. There's also a gap in the research where researchers look at the different distribution patterns of the roof. So rather than covering the entire roof with one material, there might be a more efficient way of spreading it out. So to address this gap, my research looks at whether green and cool roofs are more effective together in different distribution patterns. So that led to my research question: what ratio of green to cool roof and what distribution pattern would be most effective at insulation? And by most effective, I mean most capable of preventing temperature change on the inside of the building. So for my methodology, I chose experimental research because I felt it was most capable of answering my research question. I based it off of the study that I mentioned earlier by Nardini, Andri, and Crasso, who used different modules to test the different characteristics of green roofs. So for my research, I used different model buildings to test the different combinations of green and cool. My methodology included 3 basic steps, the first being building the roofs, the second collecting data, and the third analyzing the data. So here you can see a diagram showing the 9 roofs that I built. So the first row is the control row, with the black roof being normal roof shingles that you can find on any building. This is a 100% green roof, and this is a 100% cool roof. Here I have the different combinations that I made. So these are the evenly distributed roofs, where all of the green roof is on one side and all the cool roof is on the other. These are the evenly distributed roofs, where cool roof paint covers the entire surface and then green roof is distributed evenly throughout. And in the columns I have 3 different ratios. The first being 25% green, 75% cool, and then 50-50, and then 75-25. Each combination roof was compared to the 100% green and 100% cool roof, because like I said before, the purpose of this research is to see if a combination is better than one by itself. To make these roofs, I used a 1/4 inch plywood, and I made 12 inch by 22 by 22 inch model buildings. To make the green roofs, I used 1 inch of soil and Amblistigium verum moss to cover the soil. For the cool roofs, I put 2 layers of cool roof paint over the plywood. Here you can see a few example images of my roofs. This is the 100% green roof. This is the 50-50 uneven, and this is the 25-75 uneven roof. So to test these roofs, I set up a 175 watt heat lamp above the roof, about 2 feet above the surface. Then I turned it on and collected the temperature both outside and inside of each roof every 5 minutes for 100 minutes. Then I turned off the lamp and continued to collect the temperature every 5 minutes for 100 more minutes. So this allowed me to see how each roof performed in simulated summer and winter conditions under intense heat and when the heat is taken away. So I could see which roofs were most effective year-round. There were some limitations to my research. So first of all, the model building size might not be as reflective of a full-scale building. The second limitation is the moss type. So like I mentioned before, there are 2 types of green roofs, intensive and extensive. My roofs were extensive because the thinner soil and the lower lying plants. So this might not represent intensive roofs. Future researchers, if they wanted to look into that, could use the same ratios and same distribution patterns, but with different plant types and soil depths. A third limitation is that I only looked at 3 different ratios. So if future researchers wanted to find a more accurate point where green and cool roofs are most effective combined, then they could use a wider range of ratios. So here's an example of how I collected data for the roofs. This is showing the green, 100% green, 100% cool, and the control roof, and their change in the outside temperature of the building. So here is where I took the heat lamp away at 100 minutes and the temperature decreased significantly. So looking at just this graph, it might seem that the cool roof didn't insulate the building as well as the control roof because this blue line at the top represents the cool roof temperature. Then the black line is the control, and then the green line below that is the green roof. So it looks like the cool roof had a higher temperature outside. And that's because the cool roof reflects heat while the green and control roofs absorb it. So all of that reflected heat was staying in the air right above the roof, and that was increasing the outside temperature. But at the same time, the inside of the cool roof was still better insulated than the control roof. And you can see that in this graph, which is the same 3 roofs, but the inside change in temperature. So here, you can see that the expected results are found where the green roof has the best insulation, and then the cool, and then all the way up here, the inside temperature of the control roof was a lot higher. So the most important values are not the outside temperatures, but actually the inside, and that's why I focused on only those when deciding which roofs were the most successful. I made similar graphs to these for the rest of the combination roofs, comparing each one to the 100% green and the 100% cool, but rather than showing you all of those roofs, I summarized it with this comparison line. So this shows all of the roofs in order from most effective to least effective. I'll be focusing on the top 3 combination roofs, which you can see are the 75% green, 25% cool, even distribution roof, and then tied for second place are the 50-50 uneven and the 75-25 uneven roofs. So starting with the most successful, the 75% green and 25% cool, even distribution roof was the most successful because the change in temperature on the inside of the building was less than the change in temperature of the cool roof. And it was actually only 0.1 degrees more than the green roof. So this means that this roof is the most comparable to a green roof, or 100% green roof, which was the most effective coverage method. And then tied for second place are the 75-25 uneven and the 50-50 uneven roofs. So these were only partially successful because their inside temperature was it changed the exact same amount as the cool roof on the first 100 minutes. So these are more comparable to the cool roof, but not as good as the 100% green roof or the 75-25 even distribution. So looking at these 3 successful roofs, a few patterns emerge. First of all, none of the 25% green roofs made it to the successful list, and that's because we can assume that at least 50% green roof coverage is necessary for it to be most effective. As for the distribution patterns, 2 of the 3 successful roofs are unevenly distributed. I believe that this coverage pattern was more successful because as one side of the roof was better insulated than the other, it caused a disparity in the inside temperature, and that disparity caused air circulation on the inside, which kept it more well-regulated and cooler overall than the outside. So what do these results mean for permaculture? Since none of the combination roofs worked as well as the 100% green roof, you might be wondering why building wouldn't just cover the entire surface with plants. And that's because, like I said earlier, green roofs are a lot heavier than a normal roof. Most buildings can't support that much weight in every part of the roof surface. So my results would be helpful because in those cases, it would be important to put the heavier parts in the more structurally sound areas, which would be the green roof, and then the lighter parts, the cool roof, and the less structurally sound areas. That way, the weight distribution is efficient, as well as the insulation. This study is the first of its kind on combining green and cool roofs. So the new understandings found here could change the way that permaculture uses green and cool roofs together. To summarize my new understanding, I found that the 75% green, 25% evenly distributed roof was the most successful, and the 75-25 uneven and 50-50 uneven roofs tied for second place in success. These results can be put to use in future permaculture and green architecture endeavors to make buildings that are most efficient in both weight distribution and insulation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sydnee. Okay, we're each going to ask you one question.
Okay.
How did you evaluate the sources you collect to make sure they be credible, valid, and reliable? Which source did you discard and why?
To make sure that my sources were most credible, I double-checked with multiple sources. So, like I mentioned with the green roofs earlier, I looked at several different studies that showed which characteristics of the roof were most effective, commonly being heavier or deeper layers of soil and thinner, lower-lying layers of plants. And for the cool roofs, I would look at companies that sold cool roof paint because they had their specific amount of UV percentage reflection for their specific brand and formula. So I was trying to find a common theme among the different sources for green and cool roofs. Some sources that I rejected were ones involving R value. So I didn't mention this in my presentation because I wasn't able to use it. R-value is a method of placing a value on the insulation level of a material. So a higher R-value would be more effective at insulating. And when I was looking for a way to incorporate that into my methodology, I found several different formulas from several different websites, and there wasn't one formula that was deemed most accurate for R-value. So I had to leave it out.
Thank you.
What might be the real-world implications or consequences, influence on others' behaviors, decision-making processes, or discoveries related to your findings?
So a real-world implication, like I mentioned earlier, is that roofs can't always hold 100% green roof weight all the way across the surface. So building owners that want a well-insulated roof but don't want to put that much strain on their roof supports would put green roof in the more supported areas and then cool roof in the less supported areas, so that the entire surface was better insulated than a normal roof but still able to support itself.
Thank you. Thinking about the initial curiosity that led to your inquiry, what other areas of inquiry might the same curiosity lead to?
So my initial curiosity for my research was permaculture in general. The first source that I looked at was by Toby Hemingway, who I mentioned in the beginning is an expert in permaculture. His book, The Permaculture City, outlined many different methods of permaculture, including the green roofs and the cool roofs. So if I were going down a different path in permaculture, I would look at his book again and find other ways where public spaces and private spaces can incorporate nature into their design to make it more environmentally friendly and energy efficient.
Thank you.
Thank you.